This is my true story. I raised my son alone after my husband died, worked my hands to the bone, and gave him everything I had. I helped him build his house, his farm, and even tied my name to his accounts so he could start his life without worry. But one morning, after I dropped a jar in the kitchen, he looked me in the eye and said, "You're literally useless." I didn't cry. I didn't argue. But I knew what I would do next will shock him. Before I tell you what I did, please subscribe to me so that my stories reach out to more people, and tell me where you're watching from and what time it is right now. I was never supposed to do it alone. When I married my husband, we promised each other we'd raise a family together, share the burdens, and grow old side by side. But life has a way of laughing at your plans. I was 34 when the heart attack took him in his sleep, and I woke up to a silence so heavy it felt like the house itself was grieving. My son was only 12. He didn't fully understand what it meant to lose a father, but I did. I knew it meant bills piling up, working 2 jobs instead of 1, skipping meals so he could eat, and wearing the same winter coat for 10 years because buying myself a new one would mean taking something away from him. Every morning before the sun came up, I'd make his breakfast, pack his lunch, and head off to the sewing factory. When my shift ended, I'd clean houses for cash. My hands were raw from bleach, my back ached from bending over laundry and floors that weren't mine, but I kept going. I told myself it was temporary, that once he grew up and found his way, the long nights and empty stomachs would be worth it. I didn't just provide for him. I built his future piece by piece. When he was 17, I used the little savings I had to buy him his first truck so he could get to work. I co-signed his first loan when he wanted to rent land for farming. I worked overtime for months to help him make the payments when his first harvest failed. When he married, I paid for half the wedding because he didn't have enough, even though it meant selling my jewelry. I poured my love into that boy, thinking that one day, when I couldn't work anymore, I could rest knowing he would take care of me, not out of duty, but out of love. I thought I was teaching him gratitude, responsibility, and compassion by example. Every penny I earned, every choice I made, was with him in mind. The house he lives in, I helped pay the down payment, the farm equipment he uses, I co-signed the loans and helped negotiate the deals. The land itself, part of it is still legally tied to my name because I used my credit to get it approved. I never once brought it up to brag or hold over his head. I never said, "You owe me." My only request, the only thing I ever wanted in return, was respect. Respect for the years I gave up my own dreams to make sure he could have his. Respect for the countless times I swallowed my own needs so his could come first. Respect for the sacrifices that no one else saw because they were made quietly, without complaint. I believed, deep in my bones, that our bond was unbreakable. I thought we were more than mother and son. We were a team that had weathered storms together. That's why it never even crossed my mind that one day, that same boy I carried in my arms, the same boy I sat up with when he had fevers, the same boy whose scraped knees I kissed, would look at me and speak the kind of words that can't be taken back. But I didn't know it yet. At this stage, I still thought I was safe. I still thought my sacrifices meant something to him. I still thought love was enough to keep the respect alive. Time has a way of softening your strength before you even realize it's leaving. For years, I could carry laundry baskets up 2 flights of stairs without stopping, kneel in the garden for hours pulling weeds, and scrub floors until they shone. But somewhere after my 70th birthday, my knees started to ache when the weather changed. My hands, once quick and steady with a needle, began to stiffen in the mornings. I'd wake up with my lower back locked so tight it took a good 10 minutes of slow stretching before I could stand straight. It wasn't that I wanted to stop helping myself. It was that my body was quietly telling me its limits. That's when my son suggested I move onto his property. He said it like it was the most natural thing in the world. "It'll be easier for you, Mom. We'll be close. You won't have to worry about groceries or mowing the lawn anymore." I remember smiling, my heart feeling lighter than it had in years. Finally, I thought, we'd have more time together. I imagined us having coffee in the mornings, me watching from the porch while he worked the fields, maybe even cooking dinner for him and his family a few nights a week. I told myself it was the start of a gentler chapter, one where I could still contribute in ways that mattered without breaking my back. And in the beginning, I did exactly that. I took over the kitchen, not because I had to, but because I loved feeding them. I mended clothes without being asked, kept the garden neat, made jams from the berries that grew wild near the fence. When the kids had birthdays, I baked cakes from scratch, just like I did when my son was little. I thought I was making myself useful. I thought I was earning my place, not by right, but by giving. Still, I started to notice things. Little things. When his wife invited friends over, they'd all gather in the living room, and I'd hear the laughter, but somehow never be asked to join. Sometimes I'd come into the kitchen and the conversation would stop mid-sentence, replaced with a polite smile and a quick subject change. I told myself I was imagining it, but the truth is, I could feel the space between us starting to widen, not physically, but in ways that left me feeling like an outsider in the home I thought was also mine. I brushed it off. I told myself families go through phases. I reminded myself that my son had pressures I didn't fully understand. The farm, the bills, the market prices. And so, I kept giving. I kept trying to make myself small enough to never be a burden, quiet enough to never be a nuisance, useful enough to never be unwanted. But what I didn't realize was that no matter how much I did, the day was coming when my worth in his eyes would be measured by something else entirely. Morning started gentle. The kettle sang, the curtains moved a little with the breeze, and the sun came in thin gold lines across the kitchen tiles. I had berries soaking in a bowl and bread warming in the oven. I moved slowly, but I moved with purpose, like I always do. My hands aren't as quick as they used to be, and the joints make their small complaints when I twist or lift, but I know this kitchen like a map. I set the jars on the counter, sugar, flour, and the big glass jar of peaches I canned last summer when the trees were heavy and the afternoons smelled like warm fruit. I wanted to make a cobbler for the kids because they had been asking for Nana's soft cake with the sticky top, and I wanted, more than I'd like to admit, to hear someone say, "Thank you, Mom," the way he used to when he was small. I wiped the counter, turned to reach the cinnamon, and in that 1 second, the world changed. The peach jar slipped. Maybe it was the sweat on my palm, maybe it was the tiredness in my fingers, maybe it was nothing but bad luck, but the glass slid from my hand, turned once in the air, and hit the floor. The sound was sharp and final. Peaches and syrup spread like a bright sunset across the tiles. Shards of glass lay everywhere, dangerous little teeth glinting up at me. I froze. I didn't move because I know better than to step when the floor is full of glass. I said softly, "Oh no," and reached for the towel. That's when he walked in. My son. He came in fast, heavy steps, phone in his hand, jaw tight like it had been tight for days. He took one look at the mess, and his face changed into something I had seen only once before, long ago, when a storm tore a roof panel off the barn. Anger mixed with fear, mixed with shame. But this time, the storm was me. "What did you do?" he snapped. Not a question, an accusation. "I dropped the jar," I said, keeping my voice steady. "Don't move, I'll clean it." I reached for the dustpan slowly. I was careful. I have cleaned more broken things in my life than I can count. Plates, toys, hopes, and I know patience is the only safe way. He didn't listen. He moved closer, looked at the syrup and the glass and the peaches, and then at me like I was a stranger trespassing in his kitchen. "You're always in the way," he said, "always making extra work." I felt the first sting then, small but sharp. I kept my eyes down and said, "It's all right. Go on, I'll take care of it." I thought that would be the end. A bad moment, a breath, a reset. But the air in the room tightened. His wife stepped into the doorway and stopped. The children stood behind her, wide-eyed and silent, like deer in a field when a truck passes too close. My son lifted his voice. "Do you know what time it is? I've got deliveries, paperwork, a fence to fix, and now I have to deal with this?" He waved at the floor like the Peaches had planned an attack on his day. "It's just a jar," I said, gentle as I could. "I've already said I'll clean it." He laughed, but there was no humor in it. "It's not just a jar. It's you. It's always you, breaking things, moving things, meddling with things." Something inside me tried to stand up then, the part of me that remembered selling my ring to buy him his first tractor tire, the part that remembered hand-stitching his school costumes at 2 a.m, the part that remembered signing my name on the loan so he could plant his first row and call himself a farmer. I wanted to say those memories out loud, to line them up like soldiers between us, strong and undeniable. But I didn't. I bent down to start gathering the big pieces of glass with the edge of the dustpan. "Please don't step closer," I said. "You'll cut your feet." The room was quiet for a heartbeat. You could hear the oven ticking, the kettle cooling, a bird tapping on the window. Then he said it. "You're useless." Just like that. 2 words, thrown like a stone at a window that had taken me a lifetime to keep from cracking. I didn't look up. I couldn't. My eyes burned, but I would not let a single tear fall to the floor where it could mix with the peaches and the glass and be part of the mess he thought I was. His wife didn't speak. Her mouth opened and closed, and then she looked at the children, and I saw the lesson being written inside their eyes. This is how we speak to the hands that fed us. I wanted to shield them from it, but I was the target, and the shield and the silence all at once. He kept going, like the words had been waiting in him for too long. "You break things. You slow us down. You're in the kitchen when you shouldn't be, in the barn when you shouldn't be, always in the garden pulling the wrong weeds. You think you're helping, but you're just making everything harder." His voice was loud enough now that I knew the neighbors could hear if their windows were open. Shame rose in me, hot and breathless, not because I had done something wrong, but because I was being undressed in public, my usefulness stripped off me like an old coat. "Enough," I said, very softly. He didn't hear the softness, or maybe he did, and it made him angrier. "You're useless," he repeated, slower now, like he wanted the shape of the words to carve into me. "Do you hear me? Useless." I gathered another handful of glass with the dustpan. A thin cut opened on my wrist, where a small shard kissed the skin. The blood was bright and honest. I pressed the towel to it and watched the peach syrup creep into the fabric like a sunset going dark. I stood up as straight as my back would allow. I turned to the sink, rinsed the towel, and wrung it out. No one moved. "I'll finish cleaning," I said to the room, not to him. "Take the children to the porch. There's glass everywhere." His wife touched the kids' shoulders, and they shuffled out, still looking at me like I was both a person and a warning sign. He stayed. He stood there breathing hard, hands on his hips, the same posture he used when a fence fell in a storm, and he had to decide where to start. Finally, he shook his head and walked out without another word. The back door slammed. The house shook a little, then settled. I knelt, one knee at a time, because rushing is for the young and the careless, and I am neither. I picked up every piece. I wiped every streak. I lifted the sticky mat from under the stove where the syrup had run and scrubbed until it was clean. I opened the window and let the cool air come in, and I breathed slowly until the tremble left my hands. I took the bread from the oven so it wouldn't burn. I turned off the kettle. I folded the towel, rinsed it again, and placed it in the laundry sink to soak. Then I stood very still and listened to the new quiet. In that quiet, 30 years spoke to me. The long nights, the overtime, the first truck, the signed loans, the harvests, the hospital visits, the birthdays baked from scratch, the way I uprooted my own life and planted it inside his so his could grow. In that quiet, the word useless echoed and echoed until it became something else. Fuel. Not for a fire that burns a house, but for a light that shows a path. I did not cry in that kitchen. I would not give those words the honor of my tears. I washed my hands, pressed a clean cloth to the cut on my wrist, and made tea. I drank it standing up, because my legs still remember how to hold me. Outside, I heard the truck start, then fade down the road. The children's voices floated back from the porch like birds trying to sing in a storm. I poured the tea down the sink, set the cup upside down to dry, and knew, quietly, completely, that the day had changed more than the floor. The house had changed, the story had changed, I had changed. And I promised myself, with the calm voice I use when I make oaths I intend to keep, those will be the last cruel words he ever throws at me without consequence. He had called me useless. He would soon learn exactly how much power a useless woman still holds when her name is ink on paper, when her signature sits beside his on deeds and accounts, when silence becomes not weakness, but a plan. The jar broke, the peaches spread, the glass cut, and somewhere inside me a switch clicked from forgive again to remember everything. That was the morning the mother became something else, the woman who would finish her tea, wash her cup, and then pick up the phone, not to ask for kindness, but to call her lawyer. That night I did not sleep. I lay in my small bed, staring at the ceiling, my hands folded over my chest. His words kept repeating in my head, "You're useless," over and over, like a hammer hitting the same spot until it breaks. I thought of the nights I stayed awake sewing his clothes when he was a boy, even when my fingers bled. I thought of the winters when I went without a coat so he could have one. I thought of the years I worked 2 jobs to make sure he had school books, and the years after his father died when I never let him feel the emptiness in his stomach, even if it meant I went hungry. All of that, erased in 1 second by a son who now saw me as nothing more than a burden. I did not cry. I did not shout. I simply lay there, cold inside, knowing something had broken forever. It was not my heart, that had already been chipped away for years. It was my patience. I decided in that moment that his words would be the last insult he ever gave me. I would never beg for his respect again. Instead, I would take back everything I had given him. I got out of bed before dawn and sat at the little table by the window. I did not pray. I did not argue with myself. I opened my old metal box where I keep papers that matter. Inside were folders with dates on the tabs. I pulled the one that said farm startup, the one that said house, and the one that said bank. I laid them in a row, breathed once, and began to read. The facts were simple. Years ago, when my son wanted land for the farm, the bank would not lend him enough on his income alone. He asked me to help. I said yes. I went to the meeting. I let them look at my credit. I signed where they pointed. We left with loan papers that had 2 names on them, not one. His and mine. After that, he wanted to buy a small house near the field so he could be close to the animals and the crops. He did not have the down payment. I used my savings. The lawyer wrote up the deed in a rush. "We can add your name for now," he said. "It helps with title insurance. You can change it later." We never changed it. The deed said joint owners, not his, not mine. Joint. I turned to the bank folder. The first page was a signature card. It was from the day he said, "Mom, if you're on the account, you can pay a bill if I'm in the field." I agreed. It felt good to be needed. The banker typed our names. He printed the card. I signed. He signed. The clerk stamped it. That was the day my name went next to his on the main account for the farm, not as a helper, as an owner. I read the small print now with a straight back and steady hands. Either owner may withdraw or transfer funds. Either owner may close the account. Bank may rely on the signature of any owner. It was all there in plain words. No lawyer needed to explain it to me now. I remembered other details too. When he wanted a second tractor, the dealer ran the numbers and frowned. "We can do it if your mother co-signs," he said. Again, I signed. The paperwork tied the tractor to the farm loans. The farm loans were tied to the house through a clause called cross-collateralization. I did not know that phrase then. I know it now. It meant one missed payment could put both the farm and the house at risk. It also meant the person with the right to cure or call a default was named on those same documents. That person included me. There was also the operating line of credit. He had asked for it during a dry year. "Just to cover feed and fuel until harvest," he said. The bank set it up as a joint line. I was the stronger signer. They liked that. I did not like it now, but it was a fact. My signature was not a memory. It was alive in their system. I kept reading. The deed of trust for the house listed 2 borrowers. It also listed remedies if payments were late. Borrower may assume full control to protect the collateral. Borrower may request transfer to secure repayment. Those words were heavy, but they were real. I opened the farm startup folder again. There was the original land purchase, 2 names on the title. There was the later parcel he added for storage. That one was joint tenancy with right of survivorship. I remembered the day we signed it. The clerk said, "If one of you dies, the other owns it automatically." I nodded then. Now I read it as a living rule. No will needed, no permission needed. The signature had already given me standing. I moved to the bank folder. I had copies of statements where I had paid feed bills when he was sick. I had copies of deposit slips with my initials when I took checks to town. I had the notary page from the day he added me to online access because he couldn't remember passwords. I never used that access for anything but bills, but the bank still showed me as full authority. I looked at the list of accounts: operating, savings, equipment reserve, 3 accounts, 2 names on each. I wrote down the routing and account numbers, not to keep secrets, but to be exact when I called. My name was also on the insurance for the house because I had insisted. "If my money is in the walls, my name is on the policy," I had told the agent. He agreed. That meant if the policy needed changes, I could make them. If the mortgage servicer needed proof, I could provide it. I checked the premiums. They were paid through escrow tied to the joint mortgage, another link, another place where my signature still had teeth. I remembered the day he said, "We'll take your name off when things settle." Things never settled. There was always another season, another bill, another reason to wait. Waiting had turned into years. Years had turned into leverage he forgot. I was calm as I added one more folder to the table: power of attorney. Years back, when he had surgery on his shoulder, he had signed a durable power of attorney with me as agent for business convenience. It had a narrow scope, tied to the farm and the house if he was unavailable or unwilling to act. He had never revoked it. The notary seal was still clear. Unwilling. The word sat there like a door already half open. I could hear his voice from yesterday. "You're useless." And I knew which side of the door I would stand on. I made a list on a yellow pad. 1. Call the bank, confirm authority, freeze outgoing transfers I did not approve, move balances to a new account in my name as joint owner. 2. Call the mortgage servicer and the farm lender, ask for full payoff figures, ask about any late fees, ask about the right to demand transfer or assume control under the cross-collateral clause if borrower behavior put the collateral at risk. 3. Pull copies of titles and deeds from the county site, confirm current vesting, file a notice of interest where needed to prevent quiet changes. 4. Call my lawyer, bring all papers, ask for the cleanest path that protects me fully and does not break the law. 5. Act fast and act silent. No speeches, no warnings, just signatures. I closed the metal box and dressed. My hands were steady. My breath was even. I was not plotting a fight. I was preparing to stand in the space my own name had created. He had called me useless. The documents in front of me said otherwise. They said I had been the spine behind his house, his farm, his bank. They said my ink was not a favor, it was ownership. He forgot that. I did not. I picked up the phone and dialed the bank's number from the back of the statement. A human answered. She asked for my name, my date of birth, the last 4 digits on file. I gave them. She found the accounts. "Yes, ma'am," she said, reading the screen. "You are a joint owner with full rights." I said, "Good. Please note that I will be visiting today to make changes." She said she would. I thanked her. Then I called the lawyer. His assistant answered, recognized my name, and put me on his calendar for the afternoon. "Bring everything," she said. "I will," I replied. I hung up and looked once more at the 3 folders: house, farm, bank. He had thought the word useless would break me. It had only cleared my sight. I would not yell. I would not explain. I would not ask for respect he did not have. I would use the rights I already held, the ones he begged for when he needed help, and then forgot when the harvests were good. He forgot the signatures. I didn't. And now I would move them like quiet stones across a board he never learned to see. I walked into the bank with my folder and my head high. A manager led me to a small glass room. I laid out my ID and the account papers. She checked the system and confirmed I still had full authority over every joint account. I didn't explain why. I simply said, "Transfer all balances into a new account in my name. Leave $1 in each old account. Remove all cards except mine. Remove his online access." She typed, printed forms, and I signed them. Within minutes, the money was in my account, under my control. Next was my lawyer's office. I spread out property deeds, loan papers, and bank documents. He studied them and nodded. "We can take everything legally," he said. We started with the house. Because my name was still on the title and there'd been a late payment, I could assume full control to protect the collateral. He drafted the forms to update ownership records and redirect all payments to me. The farm came next. 2 parcels were in joint ownership. One even had a power of attorney he'd given me years ago. That was enough for management rights. My lawyer prepared notices to the county stating I now controlled the land and all operations, then the equipment, the tractor and tools tied to his business loans. We sent instructions to the bank that all equipment matters must go through me. I also took over the farm insurance, making sure any payout would come to me first. We requested payoff figures from lenders so I could pay or restructure on my terms. Every letter went out under my name as co-owner. We filed everything at the county recorder's office: new management notices, mailing address changes, and property control affidavits. The clerk stamped each page. Every stamp felt like a lock clicking shut. Before leaving, I revoked any powers I had once given him over my own property or accounts. From now on, there would be no signature of mine he could use. I mailed certified copies to every lender, insurer, and tax office, plus 1 to him. No warning, no argument, just proof of change. By the end of the day, my phone lit up with alerts. Accounts updated, access removed, new deposits in place. Everything now pointed to me. I sat at my kitchen table with a cup of tea, watching the light fade. I hadn't raised my voice. I hadn't begged. I had simply moved quietly, using the law and the rights I already had. He had called me useless. But today I proved that my silence was not weakness. It was the sound of everything he owned slipping into my hands. It didn't take long for the first cracks to appear. 3 days after the transfers, a letter from the bank landed in his mailbox. A cold printed notice that his accounts were empty, his cards frozen. I knew the moment he saw it because the tractor, which usually rumbled in the early morning, stayed silent that day. Then came the phone calls from suppliers. Without funds, his orders were canceled. Seed deliveries were returned. Repairmen stopped showing up because their last invoices were unpaid. Word spreads fast in a small farming town. People started asking questions. 2 more days passed, and the mortgage notice arrived. It was addressed only to me now. The same with the property tax letters. His name was disappearing from his own life, one envelope at a time. I didn't have to say a word. The paper trail spoke for me. The farmhands began to worry. Some of them had worked there for years, but when payroll day came and there was no money, they knew something was wrong. I heard later that one of them told him, "Your mother's name is on every check now." I imagine his face when he realized I hadn't just taken his money. I had taken his foundation. A week earlier, he had been the man everyone came to for work or advice. Now he was the one people whispered about at the feed store. I saw it in their eyes when I went to town. They knew the balance of power had shifted. His truck sat in the driveway for days. He didn't have fuel money. The barn doors stayed shut. The once busy farm turned into a quiet, lifeless patch of land. What struck me most was how fast it all unraveled. Years of work, connections, and reputation gone in less than a week. Not because of bad luck, but because he forgot the most basic rule: never bite the hand that built you. By the time the official ownership transfers hit the county records, there was nothing left for him to salvage. No house, no land, no income. Every door he tried to open led back to me, and I didn't open any of them. I didn't do it to be cruel. I did it to show him the weight of his own words. He had called me useless. Now, without me, he couldn't even keep the lights on. That truth wasn't something I shouted at him. It was something he had to live with every single day as he watched everything he thought was his slip away. It was exactly 1 week to the day since he'd called me useless. I was in the kitchen making tea when the phone rang. I knew it was him before I even looked at the screen. That's the thing about some voices. You can hear the panic before they speak. I let it ring twice before I answered. His tone was nothing like the sharp, dismissive voice I'd heard a week ago. This time it was frantic, almost cracking. "What happened?" he demanded, as if the world had turned upside down overnight. "The bank, the farm, my house. It's all gone. You can't do this to me." I didn't rush to reply. I let him fill the silence with his own desperation. He kept talking, voice rising and breaking. "Do you have any idea what you've done? I can't pay my workers. I can't even buy groceries. You've ruined me." I thought about all the years I had gone without so he could have more, about the nights I stayed up sewing clothes, mending fences, paying bills he couldn't cover, about the day I signed my name on those loan papers, trusting that he would never forget who helped him stand on his own feet. And now, here he was, choking on the reality that I had quietly taken back what I had given. When I finally spoke, my voice was calm, steady, almost cold. "You told me I was useless," I said. "Now you'll see what nothing really feels like." There was a long pause. I could hear his breathing, heavy, uneven. Then, a single word: "Please." It wasn't the kind of please that comes from pride. It was the kind that comes when pride is gone and there's nowhere left to turn. I didn't argue. I didn't explain. I didn't tell him about the paperwork or the meetings or the way the lawyer smiled when I showed him the old agreements with my name still on them. Some lessons don't need to be explained. They need to be lived. So I ended the call with 4 words: "This was your choice." Then I hung up. The silence after that was louder than his shouting had been. For years, I had been the one holding him up. Now, he would have to stand on his own, and he was already falling. I didn't block his number. I didn't need to. That was the last time I ever answered his call. After that call, everything started to crumble for him. Without the house, he had nowhere to live. The notice to vacate was clear and final. No amount of shouting or pleading could change the fact that my name was now on the deed, not his. He packed his things in a rush, throwing clothes into bags, leaving behind the furniture we once picked together when he first moved in. Without the farm, there was no income. The workers I once knew by name stopped showing up. The tractors sat idle in the fields, rusting under the sun. The animals were sold off one by one. The sound of life on that land faded into a heavy silence. And without the bank funds, he was stripped bare. The debts he had ignored for months came crashing in. Creditors called day and night. Letters marked "Final Notice" piled up by his front door, though soon enough, he wouldn't even have that door. The community started whispering. Out here, news spreads faster than wind through dry grass. Everyone knew something had happened, though not all knew the details. Some pitied him. Others said it was about time he faced the consequences. I didn't care which side they were on. I wasn't doing this for them. I was doing it for me. I watched it happen without stepping in. This wasn't revenge for the sake of revenge. This was balance being restored. For years, I had been his safety net, the person he could insult, ignore, and still expect to catch him when he fell. But I had cut that net clean through. He tried to find other places to stay, but no one wanted to take in a man with his reputation. Even the friends he once bragged to about his independence kept their distance. It turns out independence feels a lot heavier when no one is willing to share the weight. There were moments I wondered if I'd gone too far, but then I'd remember the way he looked at me that morning in the kitchen, as if I were just a piece of old furniture in his way. I'd remember the years of sacrifice he never once thanked me for, and I'd know, deep in my bones, that this was the only way he'd ever understand. By the time the first frost set in, he was gone from the land completely. The farm sat quiet, the house stood empty, and the keys to both were on my table. I didn't celebrate. I didn't cry. I simply carried on, because for the first time in a long time, my life wasn't built around saving someone who didn't see my worth. After he was gone, I moved into the farmhouse myself. It was quiet, but not the kind of lonely quiet I'd felt when he lived here and treated me like a burden. This quiet was peaceful. I fixed the place up, fresh paint on the walls, new curtains in the kitchen, flowers in the yard. The house began to feel like mine, not just in the legal sense, but in the way it welcomed me when I opened the door. I kept the farm, not to work it like before, but to rent out the land. The steady income was enough to live comfortably without worry. I could afford the medicine I needed, the repairs the house required, and the little treats I'd always put off buying because I was saving for the family. Now I was saving for me. There were days I would sit on the porch with a cup of tea, watching the sun set over the same fields I had once helped him build from nothing. The air smelled of grass and earth, and I'd think about how much I had given him, and how little he thought it mattered. But I didn't feel bitterness anymore. I had let that go with him. People in town asked where he was, and I would simply say, "He's not here anymore." I didn't gossip. I didn't explain. His story was his to tell, if he had the courage to tell it. Mine was to keep living without carrying his disrespect on my shoulders. I never heard an apology from him. I stopped expecting one. Some people don't change, even when life strips them down to nothing. But I did change. I learned that I could protect my own dignity without shouting, without fighting, just by stepping away and taking back what was mine all along. The keys to his house, his farm, and his future sat in a small wooden box on my desk. I never opened it except to dust it. It wasn't about gloating. It was about remembering that love is a gift, not a debt, and respect is something no parent should have to beg for. In the evenings, I'd watch the sky turn orange, then purple, then black. I'd think about the years I spent trying to earn his kindness, only to realize I'd been giving mine away for free to someone who didn't deserve it. Now every kindness I gave was on my terms. I didn't hate him. I didn't wish him harm. I just knew my life would be lighter without him in it. And in that stillness, in that space I had finally claimed for myself, I found something I thought I'd lost forever: peace.